Let's get more perspective on this now from Calvin Dark. He's president of the RC Communications and International Communications firm. He joins us live from Washington, D.C. Thanks for joining us. Calvin, how important is it that such a high-profile member of Joe Biden's administration is visiting Africa, given that during the last administration of Donald Trump, we didn't see him or his vice president on the continent?
Hello, good to be here. This trip was very, very important because, as you mentioned, during the last administration, there wasn't, for example, the summit for the African and U.S. leaders that Obama had during his term and that Joe Biden had this past December. And one of the criticisms from the first summit was that there wasn't enough follow-up. So one of the things that President Biden said on several occasions this past December is that the United States is all in for Africa's future. And he knew that if it was just a photo op here in Washington, that wouldn't suffice. So since December, we have seen several high-level visits on the continent. Of course, Vice President Kamala Harris, also the Secretary of the Treasury, the Secretary of State, and even the First Lady was in Africa since December. So I think this is an important visit because it shows that the Biden administration is serious about following up on the promises it made during the Africa-U.S. Leaders Summit.
There has been some criticism of the countries that she's chosen to visit. So if you look at Ghana, Tanzania, where she's expected to arrive in the next few minutes, as well as Zambia, where she's on to next, these are stable democracies, and people have said, well, maybe she should have gone to other not so stable democracies, countries that have suffered some catastrophes like Malawi, for instance, in recent weeks, where she could show how much America really cared for Africa.
Well, I think that there's a strategy behind where she went on this visit. Like the countries you mentioned, developing countries, which there is a very important role that the United States can play to assist these countries and show their support. But I think that if the United States only goes to these developing countries, it perpetuates the perception that U.S.-Africa relations are based on need, on aid, on humanitarian assistance. I think the goal of this trip and the countries that she chose were to really strengthen the U.S.-Africa ties. There has to be public and private sector investment. And in the United States, we haven't, in the private sector, invested as much as we could in Africa. And so when she goes to stable democracies that are ready and willing to accept this investment from the private sector, it gives them confidence. Because one of the big hurdles that they discussed in December and that they're continuing to discuss now is American businesses wonder about stability and security. So I think because her focus was economic, the choice of the countries fit that role.
And just very briefly, if you would, Mr. Dark, I mean, how important is it that this is the first female vice president of the United States? She's got some African and South Asian blood in her, and she's visiting Tanzania that has its very first female president.
It's a wonderful thing for, I think, all Americans, all Africans, people all over the world to really look at and be inspired. Because think about it, you know, who would have said 10, 20 years ago that we would have the first woman, Black woman, American vice president on the continent of Africa, and not just visiting, you know, diplomatic visit, but actually going there and promoting entrepreneurs, women, trying to like strengthen ties with the private sector. It's really, really cool. I'm very, very proud. And I think a lot of Americans are as well.
I love the way you put it. It's really, really cool. Calvin Dark there. Thank you very much for talking to us here on Focus on Africa. Thank you.
Thank you.